Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most shocking developments in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, as reports emerge that Ukrainian forces have used British-supplied Storm Shadow missiles to strike deep inside Russian territory. This event has set off waves of panic, confusion, and outrage within the Kremlin and among Russia's political elite. The idea that the heartland of Russia itself could be targeted by precision Western weapons is something no one in Moscow ever thought they would face directly. The reports suggest that Ukrainian long-range cruise missiles hit strategic industrial targets in regions that were previously considered far beyond Ukraine's reach. These targets reportedly included facilities connected to Russia's military supply network, such as a chemical plant that produces fuel and explosive materials. The explosions were described as massive, sending plumes of smoke into the sky and triggering widespread alarm. Whether every claim about damage is accurate or not, the psychological impact on Russia has been undeniable. For months, Ukraine has been asking its Western allies for permission to use long-range weapons to strike military assets inside Russia. Until recently, the West was cautious, fearing that it might escalate the conflict. But now, with the appearance of Storm Shadow missiles being used in this way, it marks a serious shift in the nature of this war. It is no longer confined to front lines in eastern Ukraine or Crimea. It has crossed into Russian soil itself. That alone makes this one of the most consequential moves of the entire conflict. Inside Russia, the news has caused panic and unease. Reports began circulating that senior government officials and members of the elite were temporarily leaving Moscow for other parts of the country, concerned about safety or potential unrest. Even though the Kremlin dismissed these rumors, there's a growing sense that the illusion of complete control and security within Russia's core has been shattered. When explosions happen hundreds of kilometers inside the border, ordinary citizens start to question the strength of their air defenses and the direction of their leadership. The Storm Shadow missile is not just any weapon. It's a highly advanced British-made long-range cruise missile designed for deep strikes on heavily fortified targets. It flies low to avoid radar detection and can hit with pinpoint accuracy. Ukraine has modified some of its older Soviet aircraft to launch these missiles, giving them the ability to strike targets far beyond the front lines. This capability represents a major leap forward for Ukrainian forces, and it's a serious concern for the Russian military establishment. This strike carries several implications. First, it directly challenges Russia's sense of territorial invulnerability. For most of the war, Russian citizens could view the conflict as something happening far away in Ukraine. Now, they are realizing that key parts of their country are within reach of Ukrainian weapons. Second, it puts pressure on the Russian military to defend vast new areas of land, spreading its already strained air defense systems even thinner. Third, it sends a clear message from Kiev to Moscow. No part of Russia involved in sustaining the war is safe. From Ukraine's perspective, this attack is both strategic and symbolic. Strategically, it hits the Russian war industry where it hurts most, in the factories and plants that produce materials needed for the front. Symbolically, it shows that Ukraine can reach deep inside the Russian state, defying months of Russian threats about retaliation. The Kremlin had often warned that Western supplied weapons used inside Russia would cross a red line. But now that it has happened, the world is watching to see whether Moscow will escalate or absorb the blow. Russian state media immediately went into overdrive. Officials downplayed the impact, insisting that their air defense systems had intercepted most of the incoming missiles and that only minor damage occurred. Yet, social media videos and local reports painted a different picture, showing large fires, emergency vehicles rushing to the scene, and disrupted operations at nearby facilities. The contrast between official calm and local panic highlights how much control over the narrative the Kremlin is trying to maintain. Meanwhile, Western analysts are interpreting this as a sign of growing Ukrainian confidence. By demonstrating its ability to strike inside Russia, Ukraine hopes to weaken Moscow's will and potentially force it to divert resources from the front lines. Every missile Russia moves to defend its rear is one less defending its troops on the battlefield. It's a war of attrition not only in weapons but also in psychology. For the Russian leadership, however, this development is humiliating. Vladimir Putin has long built his image on strength, stability, and control. But if his own people begin to believe that their homeland can be attacked, it damages that image. Even rumors that the Kremlin elites are worried or leaving Moscow temporarily can be devastating for public confidence. The Russian government thrives on the idea that the center of power is unshakable. Any sign of weakness, even symbolic, challenges that narrative. Experts are warning that Russia may respond with heavier strikes against Ukrainian infrastructure, or even intensify its attacks on power grids and cities. Such retaliation would serve to project strength and distract from internal unease. However, there's a limit to what Russia can do without escalating to levels that risk direct confrontation with NATO countries. The Kremlin must now calculate how to respond forcefully enough to appear strong, but not so forcefully that it triggers a wider war. The geopolitical implications are enormous. If Ukraine continues to receive permission from its allies to use Western weapons for deep strikes inside Russia, it changes the entire dynamic of the conflict. For months, Western countries limited Ukraine's ability to strike over the border, fearing escalation. Now, if that policy is shifting, even quietly, it means the West believes Russia's capacity for escalation is limited. This, in turn, emboldens Ukraine further and could bring the war to a more unpredictable phase. In Moscow, there are signs that the government is tightening security around sensitive sites, deploying more anti-aircraft systems near industrial areas, and stepping up domestic propaganda to reassure citizens. Yet the underlying tension is impossible to hide. The war has now reached the Russian homeland in a tangible way, and that changes everything. For the Russian elite, who once saw the conflict as distant, the sense of safety is beginning to erode. From a military standpoint, these kinds of strikes are meant to create cumulative effects. One missile attack may not cripple production, but repeated deep strikes can disrupt logistics, lower morale, and force Russia to expend more resources on defense. Over time, that can wear down even a massive military power. For Ukraine, it's also about proving that Western investment in advanced weaponry is paying off, that these tools can change the course of the war. Still, there are risks. Each time Ukraine hits inside Russia, it risks alienating countries that fear escalation. Some Western leaders may hesitate to support strikes beyond Ukraine's borders, worried that it gives Moscow an excuse to retaliate in unpredictable ways. There's also the moral question. Hitting facilities in another country, even if they serve military purposes, always carries a risk of civilian casualties. Kiev insists it only target its legitimate military infrastructure, but the fog of war makes it hard to verify that completely. What's certain is that the war has entered a new phase. The days of Russia believing its interior was untouchable are over. The political elite now faces questions from citizens, and the aura of invincibility surrounding Putin's regime has been dented. In authoritarian systems, Perception is as powerful as reality. If the people begin to lose faith in the leadership's ability to protect them, cracks can start to form slowly at first, but steadily over time. For Ukraine, this is both a victory and a challenge. It shows military progress, but it also raises expectations among its own population and allies. Now that Kiev has demonstrated it can hit inside Russia, its people will expect more results, more pressure, and more visible successes. That can be a heavy burden, especially as Ukraine still faces brutal fighting on its own territory. There's also a message being sent beyond Russia and Ukraine. Other nations are watching this closely. They're seeing how modern warfare has changed, how long-range precision weapons can shift the balance of power even when armies are unequal in size. They're also seeing how propaganda, morale, and information control can be just as important as tanks or missiles. This conflict has become a testing ground for the warfare of the future. As for the Russian elite, there are whispers that some are quietly moving families or assets out of the country again. That doesn't mean mass panic, but it does suggest unease. The closer the war gets to Moscow, the more personal it becomes. If the idea of safety within the Kremlin's walls begins to fade, internal divisions could grow. History has shown that empires often appear strongest just before the cracks start showing from within. Ukraine's deep strike may not end the war, but it has shifted the psychological battlefield. The image of a secure, impenetrable Russia has been pierced. Whether or not there was genuine panic among Putin's inner circle, the symbolism alone is powerful. It sends a message that no matter how powerful Russia seems, it can be reached, it can be hurt, and that in war is often the beginning of a much deeper unraveling. Looking ahead, the world will be watching for signs of how Moscow responds, whether it hardens its stance, seeks revenge, or quietly recalibrates. For Kiev, the goal will be to maintain momentum without overstepping the limits that might cost it international support. And for the rest of the world, this is a stark reminder that wars can evolve in unexpected ways, pushing boundaries once thought untouchable. Thank you all for watching and staying informed. If you enjoyed this deep analysis, please like and subscribe for more updates on the Russia-Ukraine conflict and other breaking global events. Let me know in the comments what you think this means for the future. Is this a turning point in the war or just another chapter in a long struggle? Stay tuned, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next one.